After my grandparents passed away in a car accident, their attorney announced that I was the only heir to their $26 million fortune. My family ordered me to surrender it. I refused. That same night, they threw me out. I moved into my grandparents' mansion. The next morning, they arrived to force me out, but stopped cold when they saw who was standing beside me. Their expressions turned to pure shock. Can you imagine finding out your humble, loving grandparents left you their entire $26 million fortune, only to have your own parents, who barely spoke to you, demand every penny? And when you refuse, they kick you out of your home, effectively making you homeless. This isn't just about money, it's about seeing true colors, in the most brutal way. I'm Natalie, 27 years old. And until 6 weeks ago, I was just an ordinary kindergarten teacher, living paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment. The kind of life my parents scoffed at. My grandparents, Elizabeth and Harold, they raised me more than my own parents ever did. They were wealthy, yes, but so incredibly humble. They taught me that character matters more than cash. So when they died in that terrible car crash, I was absolutely shattered. Then came the lawyer meeting, where I learned they had left me their entire estate. That's when my family, the ones who barely visited my grandparents, suddenly wanted everything. And I refused. Growing up, my parents were always physically present, but emotionally absent. My father, Richard, worked 60-hour weeks climbing the corporate ladder. My mother, Diane, spent her time networking with all the right social circles. Family dinners were rare, and when they happened, my parents were usually distracted by work calls or social planning. They provided the basics, but warmth, guidance, emotional support? Those were in short supply. From the age of 5, I spent every single weekend, every summer, with my grandparents. Their modest 4-bedroom house became my true home. Despite their significant wealth, they lived simply. Their 3-acre property had a vegetable garden where Grandpa Harold taught me to grow tomatoes and zucchini. Grandma Elizabeth showed me how to bake cookies from scratch, how to sew. They attended every school play and soccer game my parents missed. They were there. My grandparents built their fortune from nothing. They started a small logistics company in their garage in the 1970s with just one truck and a dream. By the time I was born, Alexander Logistics had become a regional powerhouse with a fleet of 200 trucks and 5 warehouses across 3 states. Yet, you'd never know their net worth by looking at them. Grandpa drove the same pickup truck for 20 years. Grandma clipped coupons and bought clothes on sale. They always told me, money is just a tool, Natalie, not a measurement of your worth. Use it to build something meaningful, not to impress people who don't matter. This philosophy was precisely what created the rift with my father. As their only son, he grew up expecting to inherit everything and live lavishly. He resented their frugality, calling them stingy and old-fashioned. What he saw as deprivation, they saw as character building. They paid for his college education, but expected him to work summer jobs. When he graduated, they helped him with a down payment on a modest starter home, not the luxury condo he wanted. The final break came when my father demanded a senior position at their company despite having no relevant experience. My grandparents refused, saying he needed to earn it like everyone else. He stormed out, taking a corporate job instead, and their relationship was never the same. For me, they took a different approach. They paid for my education in full, allowing me to graduate debt-free, but they encouraged me to choose a career based on passion rather than profit. When I decided to become a kindergarten teacher, they were genuinely thrilled, even though my starting salary was barely above minimum wage. Throughout my adult life, I maintained a close relationship with my grandparents. We had standing Sunday dinners every week. I helped them navigate new technology, setting up their smartphones and showing them how to video chat. They taught me their family recipes, told stories about their youth. During holidays, I always stayed with them rather than at my parents' house, which caused endless friction with my mother, who saw it as a personal rejection. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from my grandparents' home. It was small, but cozy, filled with second-hand furniture and plants. My salary at Sunshine Elementary School was modest, but it covered my needs. I found joy in simple pleasures, reading library books, hiking in the state park, volunteering at the animal shelter. My grandparents respected my independent lifestyle, though they occasionally surprised me with practical gifts like new winter tires or a high-quality blender. 6 weeks ago, everything changed. I was grading papers on a Tuesday evening when I got the call from the police. My grandparents had been driving home from their favorite restaurant when a drunk driver ran a red light, hitting their car at full speed. They died instantly. The officer said they didn't suffer, but that brought little comfort. The funeral was a blur. I remember my parents taking charge of the arrangements, arguing with the funeral director about costs. My brother, Jason, flew in from California, spending most of the time on his phone. Aunt Pam cried dramatically for photos, but stopped the moment cameras were put away. Uncle Steve just stood awkwardly in corners, following Aunt Pam like a shadow. None of them had visited my grandparents in years, yet suddenly they were acting like the grieving family. I just felt numb. The two people who truly understood and supported me were gone forever. Their home, once warm and inviting, now stood empty. I couldn't bring myself to go inside after the funeral. Instead, I returned to my apartment, took bereavement leave from school, and tried to process my new reality. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a call from Matthew Goldstein, my grandparents' attorney. He requested that I, along with my immediate family, come to his office for the reading of the will. Little did I know how that meeting would upend everything I thought I knew about my family. The morning of the will reading dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I arrived at Goldstein Legal 15 minutes early, dressed in a simple black dress, carrying the umbrella my grandmother had insisted I keep in my car for emergencies. The office was located in a converted Victorian house downtown, its interior warm with wood paneling and leather chairs. Matthew Goldstein greeted me with a gentle handshake. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. My grandparents had mentioned him often as both their attorney and friend for over 30 years. "I am so sorry for your loss, Natalie," he said quietly. "Elizabeth and Harold were extraordinary people. I will miss our chess games and her lemon bars." His genuine emotion made my eyes well up. "Thank you," I managed. "They spoke highly of you, too." Before we could continue, the glass door swung open, and my family arrived all at once. My father, Richard, entered first, checking his expensive watch impatiently. At 56, he looked like an older, harder version of my grandfather, but without the warmth. My mother, Diane, followed, her designer handbag probably costing more than my monthly rent. My 25-year-old brother, Jason, swaggered in wearing sunglasses indoors, his idea of business attire being a wrinkled button-up shirt partially tucked into jeans. Behind them came Aunt Pam, my father's younger sister, already talking loudly on her phone about some perceived slight from her country club friends. Uncle Steve trailed behind, nodding politely to me, but quickly averting his eyes. They had been married for 20 years, but I had rarely heard him speak more than a few sentences at family gatherings. "Well, let's get this over with," my father announced, without bothering with greetings. "Some of us have actual businesses to run." Matthew smiled thinly. "Of course, Richard. Please follow me to the conference room. We are all here now." The tension in the room was palpable as we settled around a large oak table. My father sat at one end, as if claiming authority, while I chose a seat near Matthew's position at the head. The others arranged themselves according to their usual alliances, my mother next to my father, Jason next to her, Aunt Pam and Uncle Steve across from them. "Before we begin," Matthew said, "I want to clarify that Elizabeth and Harold were of completely sound mind when they updated their will last year. They were thorough in their considerations and explicit in their wishes." My father snorted. "Just read it, Matt. We know how it goes. Dad built the business. I am his son. Standard inheritance procedure." Matthew ignored the interruption and opened a leather portfolio. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. I, Harold Alexander, and I, Elizabeth Alexander, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this our last will and testament. The formal legal language continued for several minutes, with Matthew detailing revocations of previous wills and appointment of executors. My family shifted impatiently. Finally, he reached the section everyone was waiting for. We hereby bequeath our entire estate, including but not limited to all cash assets totaling approximately $8 million, our investment portfolio valued at approximately $12 million, all real estate holdings, including our primary residence, valued at $5 million, and our 25% ownership stake in Alexander Logistics, valued at approximately $1 million, to our beloved granddaughter, Natalie Grace Foster. The room went completely silent. I stopped breathing for a moment, certain I had misheard. Matthew continued. We specifically and intentionally make no provisions for our son Richard Alexander, our daughter-in-law Diane Alexander, our grandson Jason Alexander, our daughter Pamela Davis, or our son-in-law Stephen Davis, as we have provided for them during our lifetime, and have made our reasons clear to our attorney. Let me see that, my father shouted, standing up so abruptly his chair tipped backward. He snatched the document from Matthew's hands, scanning it frantically. This is ridiculous. My mother joined in. $26 million to a kindergarten teacher. She wouldn't know the first thing about managing that kind of money. Jason slammed his hand on the table. What about me? I'm family, too. I need startup capital for my business ventures. Aunt Pam turned to me, her face flushed with anger. What did you do? How did you manipulate them into this? I sat in shocked silence, unable to process what was happening. Matthew calmly retrieved the will from my father's grip. If you will all please take your seats, there is more. Harold and Elizabeth recorded a video message to be played at this time. He pressed a button on a remote, and the large screen on the wall illuminated. My grandparents appeared, sitting side by side on their living room sofa. My heart clenched at seeing them alive again, looking exactly as they had the last time I visited. Grandpa Harold spoke first. If you are watching this, it means we have passed on. We want to explain our decisions directly to prevent any misunderstandings. Grandma Elizabeth continued, Richard, Pam, we love you as our children, but we have been deeply disappointed by the values you have embraced and passed to your own children, with the exception of Natalie. For decades, my grandparents explained, they had watched my father and aunt prioritize material wealth over relationships, treating them as a resource to be tapped rather than as parents to be cherished. They detailed years of missed family events, requested loans never repaid, and dismissive attitudes toward their modest lifestyle choices. The business we built, Grandpa said, was never about amassing wealth for its own sake. It was about creating security for our family and opportunities for our employees. We built it through hard work, integrity, and treating people fairly. Natalie is the only one who has demonstrated these values consistently, Grandma added. She visits us not because she wants something, but because she genuinely cares. She has chosen a career helping children despite the low pay, because it fulfills her purpose. We trust Natalie to be a good steward of what we have built, Grandpa continued. She will honor our legacy and use these resources wisely, not squander them on status symbols or get-rich-quick schemes. The video continued for several more minutes, with my grandparents expressing their hopes for how the inheritance might be used to support education and community development, areas they had always cared about but had limited time to address while running their business. As the screen went dark, my father exploded. This is absolute garbage. They were clearly senile. We will contest this will. No judge will uphold this insanity. Matthew remained perfectly calm. They anticipated that response, Richard. They underwent extensive cognitive testing before finalizing this will, with multiple independent doctors certifying their competence. Additionally, they documented years of behaviors that informed their decision. I must advise you that contesting will be extremely difficult, expensive, and unlikely to succeed. My mother turned to me, her voice suddenly sweet. Honey, sweet Natalie, darling. You understand this isn't right. Your grandparents were confused. This money belongs to the family, not just you. You'll share it with us, won't you? I felt cornered, all eyes on me. I have to think about this, I stammered. I had no idea they would do this. Think about it? Jason scoffed. There's nothing to think about. That money should be divided equally or managed by someone with actual business experience. My father interjected, meaning himself. As the arguing intensified, Matthew gently touched my arm. You don't have to decide anything today, Natalie. Take time to process. My office will handle all immediate matters related to the estate. He handed me a thick envelope. This contains all the relevant documents, keys to their house, and contact information for their financial advisors. Call me anytime with questions. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that, with threats of lawsuits and accusations flying. Matthew eventually asked everyone to leave, stating he had another appointment. As we filed out, my father grabbed my arm roughly. This discussion is not over, he hissed. Come to our house tonight at 6. We will sort this out as a family. His tone made it clear this was not a request. I nodded numbly, too overwhelmed to argue. As they departed in their separate luxury vehicles, I sat in my 10-year-old sedan in the parking lot, clutching the envelope, and wondering how an inheritance meant to be a blessing had so quickly become a curse. I spent the afternoon in a daze, driving aimlessly around town before stopping at a quiet park to gather my thoughts. The envelope from Matthew sat unopened on my passenger seat. Part of me wanted to peek inside, to understand exactly what my grandparents had entrusted to me. Another part was terrified of the responsibility it represented. At 5:45, I pulled into my parents' driveway, noting that everyone else had already arrived. Their 5,000-square-foot house loomed before me, all granite and glass, designed to impress rather than welcome. I took a deep breath, grabbed the envelope, and headed inside. They were waiting in the formal living room, a space rarely used except for my mother's social gatherings. My father stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand. My mother perched on the edge of an uncomfortable-looking designer chair. Jason sprawled across the sofa, scrolling through his phone, while Aunt Pam paced nervously. Uncle Steve stood by the window, gazing out as if wishing to be elsewhere. Finally, my father said when I entered, "Sit down, Natalie." I chose a chair near the door, suddenly aware I might need a quick exit. "Let us be reasonable about this," my father began, his business negotiation voice in full effect. "Your grandparents clearly were not thinking clearly. They meant for the family to benefit, not just you." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "Sweetheart, managing wealth is complicated. Your father has the experience to handle this properly. You can still get a nice portion, perhaps enough for a down payment on a real house instead of that apartment." The condescension in her voice made my skin crawl, but I remained silent. Emboldened by my lack of response, my father continued, "Here's what we propose. You sign over the estate to me as the financial head of the family. I will ensure everyone gets their fair share. You will receive 10%, which is more than generous considering your limited needs." 10%? I finally found my voice. That would still be over $2 million. Exactly. Jason jumped in. More than enough for a teacher. I need at least $5 million for my cryptocurrency exchange platform. It's going to be huge. I looked at him skeptically. Jason had bounced between get-rich-quick schemes for years, never holding a job longer than 3 months. His last venture, an app for rating public restrooms, had collapsed after burning through $50,000 of my parents' money. "The house should go to us," Aunt Pam interjected. "We have 3 children to consider. That neighborhood would give them access to better schools." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Aunt Pam had never once visited my grandparents in that house. Her children, my cousins, were strangers who sent obligatory birthday cards with my aunt's handwriting. As the evening progressed, their tactics evolved. When demands didn't work, they switched to guilt. "After all we have done for you," my mother said, her eyes dramatically moist. "We gave you life, a good home, opportunities. This is how you repay family loyalty?" I nearly choked on my water. Loyalty? When was the last time either of you called just to check on me? When did you ever attend one of my school performances? My father changed strategies again. "We are not asking, Natalie. We are telling you what will happen. Either you sign the transfer documents voluntarily, or we will contest the will. We will bring up every questionable interaction you had with your grandparents. How often did you visit them alone? What did you tell them about us when we weren't there? It will get ugly." The threat hung in the air. I felt sick, but something inside me hardened. A memory surfaced of my grandfather teaching me to stand my ground during a playground dispute when I was 8. "No one can take your dignity unless you give it away, Natalie," he had said. "Know what is right and hold firm." Uncle Steve, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke. "Maybe we should all calm down and give Natalie some time to think. This is a lot to process." My father rounded on him. "Stay out of this, Steve. This is family business." "I am family," he responded quietly, but immediately retreated when my father glared at him. As the clock ticked past 9, Jason started drafting transfer paperwork on his laptop. My mother called their personal attorney for advice on the wording. Aunt Pam scrolled through real estate listings for my grandparents' house, talking about which walls she would knock down first. They had already divided my inheritance without my consent, mapping out how they would spend every dollar. Not once did anyone mention my grandparents' wishes or legacy. Not once did they ask what I thought should be done with the money. At 10:30, my father printed out the crude transfer document and slid it across the coffee table to me, along with a pen. "Sign it," he demanded. "Now." I picked up the paper and read it carefully. The language was broad, essentially signing away all my rights to anything my grandparents had left me. In exchange, I would receive a percentage, to be determined later at my father's sole discretion. I put the paper down. Took a deep breath. The room went silent. "What did you just say?" my father asked, his voice dangerously low. I said no. My voice was steady. "I will not sign this, or anything like it. My grandparents trusted me with their legacy for a reason. I intend to honor that trust." My mother launched into a tirade about ingratitude. Jason called me names I won't repeat. Aunt Pam began sobbing dramatically about her children's future. Through it all, I sat still, the word no becoming a shield around me. Finally, my father slammed his glass down so hard it cracked. "That is enough," he roared. "I always told Dad you were not to be trusted. You manipulated them just like you are trying to manipulate us now with this innocent act." He stalked toward me, pointing his finger inches from my face. "You have a choice to make right now, Natalie. Either you sign that paper and remain part of this family, or you take your precious inheritance and consider yourself disowned. You cannot have both." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I looked around at the faces of my family members, searching for any sign of love or understanding. I found none. In that moment, I realized a painful truth. They had never really seen me as family. I was just a means to an end, a potential source of money. Nothing more. "I am not signing," I said firmly. Standing up. "I am sorry you feel this way, but I have to respect what Grandma and Grandpa wanted." "Then get out of my house," my father snarled. "Pack your things and leave tonight. You are no longer welcome here." "I live in my own apartment," I reminded him. "I have for years." He laughed coldly. "The apartment we co-signed for because your teacher's salary couldn't qualify for the lease? Check your agreement, Natalie. We own that building through one of our investment companies. Consider your lease terminated. My stomach dropped. He was right. When I couldn't qualify for the apartment on my own, they had offered to help. I never realized they actually owned the building through a shell company. You have 30 minutes to pack essential items, my mother said, checking her watch. The locks will be changed tomorrow. I stood frozen in shock. They were actually kicking me out, making me homeless over money they had never earned. The clock is ticking, Jason smirked. Better hurry, sis. Those $26 million won't keep you warm tonight. 30 minutes is not long to pack up your life. I moved on autopilot, grabbing clothes, toiletries, important documents, and a few sentimental items. My mind kept spinning with disbelief. How could they do this? How could money turn my family into complete strangers? My father stood in the doorway of my bedroom, arms crossed, watching me like a guard, ensuring a prisoner didn't steal anything during transfer. My mother stayed downstairs, already on the phone with a real estate agent about selling my grandparents' house. Her voice carrying up the stairs. You were never really part of this family anyway, my father said coldly as I stuffed clothes into a duffel bag. Your mother and I were going to divorce before she got pregnant with you. You were the obligation that kept us together. The casual cruelty of his revelation staggered me. I had always sensed I was unwanted, but having it confirmed so bluntly was another matter entirely. We have wasted enough time and money on you, my mother added, appearing in the doorway. Your private school tuition, braces, summer camps, all those dance lessons you were terrible at. Consider this the end of our investment. Investment. Not love or care, but investment. As if I were a stock that had performed poorly. Jason appeared next, leaning against the wall with a smug expression. You'll regret this when you have nothing and no one, he said. That money will run out faster than you think. And then what? You'll come crawling back, and we'll remember how you chose cash over family. I zipped up my final bag, fighting back tears. I was determined not to cry in front of them. I would not give them the satisfaction. Is that everything? My father demanded. I looked around the room that had been mine since childhood, though I had only stayed here occasionally since college. The ballet trophies from elementary school, the framed diploma, the bookshelf filled with novels and textbooks, the photo albums. So much left behind. I can come back for the rest later, I said. My father laughed. There will not be a later. Whatever you leave tonight goes to charity or the trash. Your call. The finality of it hit me. They were erasing me from their lives completely. All because I wouldn't give them money they had done nothing to earn. I grabbed my grandmother's quilt from the bed and stuffed it into my already overflowing bag. I would not leave that behind. With 3 bags slung over my shoulders and another in my hand, I made my way downstairs. No one offered to help. At the front door, I turned around one last time. My family stood in a line, faces set in various expressions of anger, disappointment, and smug satisfaction. You might have money now, my mother said, but family is forever. You will realize what you have thrown away. I am not the one throwing away family, I replied quietly. You are. With that, I walked out the door and into the cool night air. The door slammed behind me with disturbing finality. Standing beside my car in the driveway, I suddenly felt the weight of everything crashing down. I was effectively homeless. My apartment was no longer mine. My family had disowned me. In the span of a few hours, I had gained millions, but lost the only support system I had ever known, flawed as it was. I sat in my car and finally allowed the tears to come. They streamed down my face as I gripped the steering wheel. Great heaving sobs that made my whole body shake. I cried for my grandparents, whose absence felt more acute than ever. I cried for the family I had always hoped for, but never truly had. Mostly, I cried for myself. Suddenly adrift in a world that had completely changed. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I wiped my eyes and started the car. I had nowhere to go. Hotels required credit cards with available limits I didn't have. Friends were an option, but explaining the situation seemed impossible at nearly midnight. Then, I remembered the envelope Matthew had given me. Pulling it out, I found a set of keys with a familiar rabbit-shaped keychain my grandmother had cherished, the keys to my grandparents' house. The house that was now, unbelievably, mine. The drive to their neighborhood took 20 minutes. With each mile, I felt simultaneously pulled toward the comfort of their home and terrified of entering it without them there. I had avoided the house since the funeral, unable to face the emptiness. The porch light was on when I arrived, probably on a timer my grandfather had set. I sat in the driveway for several minutes, gathering courage. Finally, I grabbed one bag and approached the front door, the key shaking in my hand. The house smelled exactly the same. A mixture of my grandmother's lemon verbena potpourri and the wood polish my grandfather used on the furniture every Sunday. I flipped on the lights, half expecting to hear their voices calling a greeting from the kitchen. The silence was deafening. I made my way to the guest room I had always used, dropping my bag on the bed. Everything was exactly as I had left it after my last weekend visit, a month before the accident. The novel I had been reading still sat on the nightstand, a bookmark indicating my progress. Fresh towels were folded on the dresser, placed there by my grandmother in anticipation of my next stay. The thoughtfulness of it, the expectation of continuity they couldn't have known would be broken, undid me again. I sank onto the bed and cried until exhaustion overtook me, falling asleep fully clothed on top of the covers. Morning came with disorienting brightness. For a moment, I expected to smell coffee brewing and hear my grandfather's off-key whistling from downstairs. Reality crashed back as I recognized the silence. They were gone. And somehow I had inherited both their fortune and their enemies, all in the form of my own family. My phone had blown up overnight with texts and missed calls, most from my father and mother, alternating between threats and sudden attempts at reconciliation. "We can work this out if you will be reasonable," read one message from my mother. My father was less subtle. "You have 24 hours to reconsider before we file suit." Jason sent a single text, enjoying the big empty house. Not for long. That last one sent a chill down my spine. It sounded like a threat, not just bluster. I forwarded it to Matthew, who responded immediately. "Stay where you are. I will be there in 30 minutes. Do not open the door for anyone else." His urgency alarmed me, but also provided strange comfort. At least someone was on my side. Matthew arrived exactly 30 minutes later, carrying a briefcase and a cardboard drink carrier with 2 coffees. I ushered him into the kitchen where we sat at the breakfast nook my grandparents had used for casual meals. "First things first," he said, sliding a coffee toward me. "Your family has already contacted 3 different attorneys about contesting the will. I anticipated this and have prepared countermeasures." I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. "They kicked me out last night. My father apparently owns my apartment building through some investment company." Matthew nodded grimly. Typical Richard tactics. Using leverage to force compliance. He began pulling documents from his briefcase. "What he did not tell you is that your grandparents provided for this exact scenario." He showed me a deed to a small cottage about 20 minutes outside town. "Your grandmother bought this property 5 years ago as an investment, but kept it in a separate trust for you. Richard does not know about it. You have somewhere to go if you need it." Relief washed over me. At least I wouldn't be homeless. But the idea of hiding out while my family circled like vultures didn't sit well. "There is something else you should know," Matthew continued. "You are not alone in this. Your grandparents had many loyal friends and associates who understood the situation with your family." As if on cue, a knock sounded at the back door. Matthew smiled. That would be Carlos. Carlos? The name was vaguely familiar. Carlos Ramirez, Matthew explained. He has been your grandparents' estate manager and handyman for 15 years. He lives in the guest house at the back of the property. I answered the door to find a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. He held his hat in his hands respectfully. Miss Natalie, he said warmly. I am very sorry about your grandparents. They were wonderful people. I saw your car this morning and wanted to check if you needed anything. The simple kindness nearly brought me to tears again. Thank you, Carlos. I am a bit overwhelmed, to be honest. Carlos nodded. Mr. Harold and Mrs. Elizabeth worried about that. They asked me to look after you if anything happened to them. The house, the grounds, everything is maintained. I have been keeping watch. Matthew invited Carlos to join us at the table. Over the next hour, Carlos shared stories about my grandparents that I had never heard, painting a picture of two people who were respected and beloved by those who worked for them, not just their entitled family members. Your father and brother, Carlos said carefully. They came here after the funeral, when no one was around. They took things, watches, jewelry, some electronics. I have it all on the security cameras. My stomach clenched. My father had installed an extensive security system for my grandparents years ago, supposedly for their protection. I had forgotten about the cameras. Carlos shook his head sadly. They did not know Mr. Harold had me update the system last year. He did not trust the old one your father put in. Said it had too many blind spots. Matthew made a note. That footage could be useful if they pursue legal action. There is more, Carlos continued. Mrs. Elizabeth kept detailed journals. She documented everything, especially family visits and interactions. They are in her study. I followed Carlos to my grandmother's small study off the main hallway. A built-in bookcase held dozens of leather-bound journals, each meticulously dated. Carlos pulled one from the shelf and handed it to me. This one mentions when your father asked for money last year, he said, for some investment opportunity. I opened the journal, immediately recognizing my grandmother's elegant handwriting. May 15th, Richard visited today. First time in 7 months. Did not ask about our health or lives. Immediately launched into pitch about cryptocurrency investment requiring $250,000. When Harold refused, Richard became hostile. Accused us of preferring Natalie. Said we were naive to trust her when she only visits to secure her inheritance. Could not be more wrong. Natalie has never asked for money. Has no idea of our net worth. Brings food every Sunday and stays to eat with us. Richard left without finishing his coffee. Harold very upset afterward. I read entry after entry, each one documenting years of similar interactions. My father demanding money. My brother pitching absurd business ideas. My mother making thinly veiled comments about their modest lifestyle being embarrassing to her social standing. In contrast, my visits were described with genuine warmth. My grandmother noted small gifts I had brought, conversations we had shared, help I had offered around the house. She saw me in a way my parents never had. As I read, the doorbell rang. Carlos went to answer it, returning with an older woman in a practical dress and cardigan. Dorothy Reynolds, he introduced her. Your grandparents' housekeeper for 20 years. Dorothy hugged me tightly. You look just like Elizabeth when she was young, she said. She was so proud of you. Over the next several hours, more people arrived. Rosa Martinez, my grandparents' business partner, who knew every detail of Alexander Logistics and offered to guide me through understanding the company. George Patel, their investment advisor, who brought comprehensive portfolios showing exactly how my inheritance was structured. Sarah Johnson, their neighbor for 30 years, who brought a homemade casserole and stories about neighborhood gatherings I had attended as a child. Each person who arrived brought not only information, but genuine affection. They had all loved my grandparents, and by extension, cared about me and my well-being. While going through my grandmother's desk, Dorothy found a hidden compartment containing letters from my father spanning decades. Each one requested money, some with thinly veiled threats about cutting off access to me if they refused. She also kept this, Dorothy said, handing me a USB drive, security footage from after the funeral. Your mother was going through Elizabeth's jewelry before the reception even ended. She took several valuable pieces, claiming Elizabeth would have wanted her to have them. My grandparents, it seemed, had been documenting my family's behavior for years. Perhaps knowing this day would come, they had created not just a financial safety net for me, but a network of support and evidence that would protect their wishes. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, as Matthew was guiding me through the complex financial documents, my phone pinged with a text from Jason. Hope you are enjoying Grandma and Grandpa's house while you can. Dad, Mom, Aunt Pam, Uncle Steve, and I are coming over tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to collect what rightfully belongs to us. Better not try to stop us or things will get ugly. I showed the message to Matthew, whose expression darkened. Threats and potential breaking and entering, he muttered. I think it is time to activate the final part of your grandparents' plan. He made several phone calls in quick succession, speaking cryptically about meetings and evidence. When he finished, he turned to me with a determined expression. Your grandparents anticipated this exact scenario, Natalie. They knew Richard and the others would not accept their decision. They prepared for it. Tomorrow morning, we will be ready for them. But tonight, I suggest you review these materials so you understand exactly what you are fighting for. He gestured to the pile of journals, financial documents, and legal papers spread across the dining room table. Your grandparents built more than just wealth. They built relationships based on trust and respect. That is their true legacy to you. As everyone except Carlos left for the evening, promising to return the next morning, I felt a strange calm settling over me. I was not alone in this fight. My grandparents had ensured that. They had given me not just their money, but their wisdom and their community. I spent the evening reading through journals and financial reports, getting to know my grandparents in a new way. They had been strategic, thoughtful, and meticulous in their planning. Everything they had done was deliberate, including their choice of heir. For the first time since the will reading, I felt equal to the responsibility they had entrusted me with. I would not let them down. As I prepared for bed, another text came through from Jason. Better sleep with one eye open, sis. Tomorrow you will see what happens to people who steal from this family. Instead of fear, I felt resolve hardening within me. Tomorrow would indeed show what happens when people try to steal from family, but not in the way Jason imagined. I woke early the next morning, anxious but determined. By 8 a.m., Matthew had arrived with coffee and pastries, along with a thick folder of legal documents. These are restraining orders ready to be filed if necessary, he explained. And these are cease and desist letters addressing the specific threats Jason made. Dorothy arrived next, immediately taking over the kitchen to prepare breakfast. The familiar smells of bacon and coffee filled the house, providing strange comfort before the coming storm. By 9:30, the house had filled with supporters. Carlos positioned himself by the front door, a silent guardian. Rosa Martinez, my grandparents' business partner, set up her laptop at the dining table, ready to present financial evidence if needed. Dorothy bustled around, ensuring everyone had coffee and food, her presence alone a connection to my grandparents' hospitality. At 9:45, cars began pulling into the long driveway. First, my father's black luxury sedan, then my mother's white SUV, followed by Aunt Pam and Uncle Steve's midlife crisis convertible, and finally Jason's impractical sports car, which he could only afford because my parents paid his rent. They are early, Matthew observed. Trying to catch us off guard. As the doorbell rang aggressively, followed by pounding, Matthew nodded to Carlos, who opened the door. My father stood on the threshold, momentarily surprised to see someone other than me answering. Behind him, the rest of my family clustered together, expressions ranging from angry to smug. "Where is Natalie?" my father demanded. "This is family business." Carlos remained immovable. "Miss Natalie is expecting you. Please come in." My family filed into the foyer, stopping short when they saw the gathering in the living room. I stood in the center, Matthew slightly behind me to my right. "What is this?" my mother asked, her voice brittle. "You brought outsiders into a private family matter." Before I could answer, the front door opened again, and 3 more people entered. First came Judge Robert Henderson, a tall, dignified man in his 70s who had been my grandparents' friend for decades. He was followed by Police Chief Maria Williams, whose daughter's education had been supported by my grandparents' charitable foundation. Last came Thomas Jang, my grandparents' financial advisor for over 20 years. My father's face paled at the sight of Judge Henderson. The judge had ruled against him in a business dispute years earlier, a case my father had tried unsuccessfully to influence through social connections. "Robert," he said, attempting a jovial tone that fell flat. "What brings you here?" The judge's expression remained stern. "I am here at the request of Harold and Elizabeth Alexander, through their attorney, Matthew Goldstein. They asked me, in the event of their deaths, to serve as an impartial witness to any family disputes regarding their estate." My mother turned to Chief Williams. "This is ridiculous. We are here to collect family heirlooms that rightfully belong to us. Why is law enforcement present?" The chief smiled thinly. "I am here as a friend of the Alexander family, not in an official capacity. Unless, of course, someone commits a crime, in which case my official duties would naturally take precedence." The implied threat was not lost on any of us. As if on cue, the back door opened, and 6 more people entered, forming a semicircle behind me. They were longtime employees from my grandparents' business, people who had known my father since childhood and had witnessed his transformation from entitled son to absent family member. "You've got to be kidding me," Jason muttered. "Is this supposed to intimidate us?" I stepped forward, finding strength in the support surrounding me. "I know why you are here. You believe you are entitled to my grandparents' estate despite their explicit wishes. You think you can bully or threaten me into giving you what you want?" My father's face hardened. "Those old fools were manipulated. We are simply here to correct that injustice." From behind me, Thomas Jang spoke up. "Actually, Richard, I have documentation of every attempt you made to access your parents' assets over the last 20 years. He opened a folder. "This includes the unauthorized transfer attempt from their retirement account in 2016, the forged check incident in 2018, and your attempt to have Elizabeth declared incompetent last year after she refused to fund Jason's failed cryptocurrency venture." My father's face reddened. "But that is taken out of context." Rosa Martinez stepped forward, tablet in hand. "I also have records of the company loan you never repaid, Richard. $200,000 borrowed in 2012 for your vacation home in Aspen. Your parents never pursued repayment, though they certainly could have." One by one, my grandparents' friends and associates presented evidence of my family's attempts to extract money over the years, contrasted with their minimal involvement in my grandparents' actual lives. Aunt Pam, who had been quietly fuming, suddenly turned to me. "You ungrateful little snake. You turned our parents against us, poisoned them with lies." Judge Henderson cleared his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Davis, I reviewed the video journals Elizabeth kept. There was no external influence. Your parents were quite clear about their reasoning." "This is all very theatrical," my mother said dismissively. "But it changes nothing. We will contest the will. We will win." Matthew stepped forward. "I have prepared documentation for you all. It includes evidence that would become public record if you contest the will." He handed each family member a thick envelope. This includes banking records, text messages, emails, and video evidence of your interactions with Harold and Elizabeth over the past decade. I encourage you to review it before making decisions about legal action." Uncle Steve, who had remained silent until now, opened his envelope and began reading. His face grew increasingly pale. After a moment, he touched Aunt Pam's arm. "We should go," he said quietly. "This is not a fight we can win." She shrugged him off angrily. My father, however, had gone very still after scanning the contents of his envelope. There were records of business dealings he had clearly hoped would remain private, along with transcripts of cruel comments he had made about his parents when he thought no one was listening. Chief Williams stepped forward. "I should also mention that the property is under 24-hour security surveillance. Any attempt to remove items without permission would constitute theft." Carlos nodded. "The new system records everything, inside and out. All backed up to secure cloud storage." As my family absorbed the implications, I walked to the sideboard and picked up a stack of documents Matthew had prepared. "These are cease and desist orders regarding the threats you have made," I said, passing them to Jason. "These," I continued, handing papers to my father, "are notices that I am aware of the items taken from this house after the funeral and expect their immediate return." My mother began to protest, but I cut her off. "And these," I said, giving her the final document, "are the terms under which I am willing to maintain any relationship with you all going forward. They include respect for my grandparents' wishes and an end to all attempts to contest the will." The room fell silent as my family realized the position they were in. Not only had my grandparents legally protected their decisions, but they had anticipated and documented every possible challenge. The community of support they had built stood firmly with me, presenting a united front my family had not expected. My father was the first to break. "This is not over," he said. But the defeat in his voice suggested otherwise. "Actually, Richard, it is," Judge Henderson replied. "Your parents were meticulous in their planning. Any judge in this county would uphold their wishes based on the evidence they compiled." One by one, my family members retreated toward the door, their threats dissolving in the face of the overwhelming evidence against them. Jason glared at me as he passed. "This is not the end," he muttered. "Perhaps not," I replied calmly. "But it is the end of you taking advantage of this family. My grandparents saw who you really are. That is why we are all here today." As they filed out to their cars, the tension in the room dissipated. Dorothy immediately began serving fresh coffee and pastries, as if to cleanse the space of the negative energy. The others gathered around, offering congratulations and support. I felt strangely empty, neither triumphant nor devastated. I had stood my ground, protected my grandparents' wishes, but lost what remained of my family in the process. The victory felt hollow. Judge Henderson seemed to sense my conflict. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Your grandparents would be proud, Natalie. Not just of what you did today, but how you did it, with dignity and principle." Rosa nodded in agreement. "You are more like them than anyone else in the family. That is why they trusted you with everything." As my family's cars disappeared down the driveway, I realized I had crossed a threshold. The family I had known was gone. But in their place stood a community bound by genuine respect and shared values. The true legacy my grandparents had built over a lifetime. It was not the family I was born into, but perhaps it was the family I was meant to have all along. 6 months passed in a blur of learning and adjustment. The first weeks after the confrontation were the hardest, filled with legal paperwork, financial decisions, and the painful process of accepting that my biological family had chosen money over relationship. They made a few half-hearted attempts to reconcile, but only when they needed something, proving that nothing had really changed. With guidance from Matthew and my grandparents' advisors, I established the Elizabeth and Harold Alexander Foundation for Education, dedicating $10 million to supporting underprivileged students and schools in our community. The foundation focused particularly on arts education and vocational training, areas my grandparents had always believed were undervalued. I returned to teaching kindergarten, much to the surprise of those who thought I would quit once wealthy. My classroom at Sunshine Elementary became a showcase for what was possible with proper resources. I personally funded new books, art supplies, and technology that the school budget could never cover. Every child got healthy snacks daily and winter coats if they needed them. Small expenses for me that made huge differences in their lives. Under Rosa Martinez's mentorship, I learned the basics of running Alexander Logistics. While I didn't take an active management role, I ensured the company maintained my grandparents' values, including their profit-sharing program for employees and generous retirement benefits. The business continued to thrive, providing stable employment for over 100 people in our community. My grandparents' house, once painfully empty, gradually became a home again. I moved from the guest room into the master bedroom, though it took months before I could sleep there without feeling like an intruder. With Carlos's help, I renovated the large basement into a community space for foundation events and educational programs. Dorothy still came 3 times a week, refusing to fully retire, despite my insistence she had earned it. My family made occasional attempts to re-establish contact, though their motives were transparent. My father called when his company faced cash flow problems, hinting broadly about short-term loans with handsome returns. My mother reached out when her social circle learned about my foundation, suddenly wanting to serve on the board. Jason texted when his latest venture failed, asking for startup capital. Aunt Pam called around the holidays, suggesting family should be together. Especially family with large houses suitable for hosting gatherings. Each time I politely but firmly maintained my boundaries, referring them to the terms I had established after the confrontation. I would consider a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care, but not one based on financial advantage. None of them could meet those simple terms. Instead, I built new traditions with the chosen family my grandparents had cultivated. Sunday dinners continued, now hosted by me, with rotating guests including Rosa, Matthew, Carlos and his family, Dorothy, and others who had been part of my grandparents' circle. We celebrated holidays together, shared milestones, and supported each other through difficulties. It was not the family I was born into, but it was a community bound by something stronger than DNA, shared values and genuine affection. One crisp autumn morning, similar to the day of their accident, I visited my grandparents' graves for the first time since the funeral. I brought fresh flowers and sat on the small bench nearby, finally ready to have the conversation I had been avoiding. "I'm trying my best to honor what you built," I told them, feeling only slightly foolish for speaking aloud. "The foundation is making a difference. 3 students have already received full college scholarships who otherwise couldn't have gone. Your employees still speak about you with such respect." A gentle breeze rustled the nearby trees, sending golden leaves spiraling downward. It was the kind of beautiful fall day my grandmother had loved, perfect for baking and reading by the fireplace. "I wish you were here to see it all," I continued. "I have so many questions about decisions you made, investments you chose, people you helped. But I'm figuring it out, step by step." In the months since inheriting, I had discovered numerous quiet charities my grandparents had supported anonymously. Children whose medical bills they had paid. Families whose homes they had saved from foreclosure. Employees whose children they had put through college. All without public recognition or praise. "Thank you for trusting me," I whispered. "I understand now why you made the choice you did. It was never really about the money. It was about values, about using resources for something meaningful rather than status or power." As I sat there, memories washed over me, not with the sharp pain of recent grief, but with a bittersweet appreciation for the time we had shared. I remembered my grandfather teaching me to fish, my grandmother showing me how to make her famous apple pie, both of them attending every school play and graduation when my parents were too busy. The inheritance had never been primarily about money. It had been about entrusting me with their legacy, their values, their vision of what wealth could accomplish when used with purpose and compassion. The next day, I hosted the Foundation's first major event, a scholarship ceremony for 20 high school seniors who would receive full college funding. As I watched these bright, determined young people accept opportunities that would change their trajectories, I felt my grandparents' presence strongly. Among the recipients was Maria Vasquez, a brilliant young woman who reminded me of myself at that age, full of potential but limited by financial constraints. She planned to become a teacher, to give back to her community, just as she had been supported. As the event concluded, Maria approached me, tears in her eyes. "My parents both work 2 jobs," she said. "No one in my family has ever gone to college. This changes everything. Not just for me, but for my younger siblings who now see it as possible." In that moment, I understood completely what my grandparents had been building all along. Not just a business or a fortune, but a legacy of positive impact. A ripple effect that would continue long after they were gone. They had trusted me to amplify that effect, to carry their values forward in ways they would never see, but had envisioned. The money had indeed revealed true colors, showing me who valued wealth over relationship. But it had also revealed a community of genuine connection, people who had loved my grandparents for who they were, not what they owned. That was the true inheritance, more valuable than any dollar amount. As I move forward, I continue teaching, running the foundation, and learning the business. The wealth allows me to amplify good work, but it does not define me. I still live relatively simply, drive a practical car, and spend weekends volunteering rather than shopping. My grandparents would approve, I think. They always said money was a tool, not a goal. I finally understand what they meant. What is your experience with family and inheritance? Have you ever had to stand up to pressure from loved ones to do what you knew was right? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stand their ground. Remember, family is about love and respect, not obligation or advantage. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to honor your own values, whatever challenges you may face.